What kind of world do we want to live in? One that prioritizes control and conformity, or one that embraces individuality and freedom?
Yeah. And are those two things even mutually exclusive? Can we have both? I don't know. But it's something to think about.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into a utopia, but not your typical everyone's happy kind of utopia. It's, well, you actually sent us this source material,
Right.
a snippet from a Danish novel called, and I'm going to butcher this, I'm sure, Flugten Fra Utopia, which means, thankfully, we have a translation, escape from utopia. And we want to focus today on the kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, the underbelly of this utopia.
Yeah, cracks in the facade, right?
Yeah.
What makes it less than ideal?
Yeah. So it takes place on an island, this utopia. It's founded on some pretty core principles, living in symbiosis with nature, total rejection of like pre-catastrophe society. They even have their own laws given to them by a guy called Martin Sheldrake.
Yeah.
So it's really
Just
interesting.
like a rejection of everything we consider modern, right?
Exactly.
Like what led to the catastrophe that made this utopia necessary?
Yeah, and everyone on the island when they turn 18 is assigned their future, what they'll do for the rest of their lives. It doesn't say how that's determined, which is also kind of scary.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit Big Brother-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's a little, we know what's best for you, which kind of makes you wonder, what happens if you don't want to do what they tell you you're going to do? And that's where these, what are they called, outsiders come in.
Ah, okay. People who don't fit in.
Yeah, they reject the utopian way of life for whatever reason. And the text definitely hints that they're seen as a threat, almost like they're cracks in this perfect society.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. If you build a society based on very strict rules, anyone who deviates from those rules is going to be seen as dangerous.
Right, exactly. And to kind of get into that a little bit, let's talk about the main character, Jones. He's about to turn 18.
Great.
Good day for him, right? He's
Yeah.
going to get that job assignment.
Right.
But there's a problem. He's got this thing, this allergy. He can't eat fermented foods.
Fermented food. Okay.
And you're thinking, what's the big deal? Well, in this utopia, fermented food is like the main thing. It's everywhere. So he's immediately set apart. He can't participate in this really basic communal ritual, having a meal together.
Yeah, that's such a powerful way to show he's an outsider. He's literally unable to consume the thing that binds everyone else together. It makes you wonder, is this a metaphor for something deeper?
Well, yeah, and it actually kind of is. He's a pretty rebellious character. He questions everything, especially this preordained future thing. And he's fascinated by his grandfather, who was also an outsider.
Ah, so there's a family history of rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. And the grandfather disappeared years ago, claiming there was a world outside of utopia, which, of course, everyone else thinks is ridiculous.
You can't have people believing there's a better alternative, can you?
Right, right. That would disrupt everything. So one day, Jones encounters a group of these outsiders. They're hiding behind the school. And he's surprised because they're not these, like, scary, threatening figures he'd imagined.
Interesting. So he's starting to see that maybe the utopian propaganda isn't entirely accurate.
Exactly. And then things get even more complicated because, remember, he can't eat the utopian diet. So he takes pity on one of these outsiders and gives them some of his food.
Uh-oh. I think I know where this is going.
You got it. Later, he finds the outsider dead, and then he sees the body being thrown onto a compost heap with other bodies. It becomes pretty clear that this utopia isn't as benevolent as it seems.
Yeah, that's a chilling image. It's like the dark underbelly of this so-called perfect society. Makes you wonder what they're willing to do to maintain order.
Yeah. And then there's this really telling moment where this girl, Io, she compares Jones to a Voria plant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a parasitic plant. It takes from others but doesn't give anything back, which is such a loaded comparison, right? It's almost like she's saying his inability to conform is going to turn him into a parasite.
The threat to the utopia.
Exactly.
So what happens next? Does he try to conform?
Well, actually, he makes a pretty drastic decision. He escapes from utopia.
Oh, he actually breaks free. I wonder if his grandfather's stories about the outside had anything to do with that. Yeah. This is where the story really starts to get interesting, you know? Pushing past the boundaries of the island and into the unknown.
Yeah, and it's during his escape that he meets Maya, another outsider. She tells him something that completely reframes our understanding of utopia. The fermented food, the thing that sustains everyone. Well, it's basically a form of, how does she put it? Brainwashing.
Wait, so this utopia isn't just about living simply and in harmony with nature. It's about controlling people's minds.
That's what Maya claims. She says it's the reason why most islanders can't think for themselves. They just blindly follow the rules.
And the fermented food is the tool.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. It makes you think about the trade-offs we might make for a sense of security or belonging. Would we be willing to sacrifice independent thought for a life free from conflict or hardship? It's a question a lot of us grapple with in our own lives, isn't it?
And here's another twist. Maya says that all outsiders are allergic to the fermented food. It's like their bodies are rejecting the thing that's keeping everyone else in line.
That's a fascinating detail. So now it's not just about a choice to dissent. It suggests there might be a biological component to rebellion, almost like these outsiders are hardwired to resist control.
Exactly. And then they set off on this little boat, hoping to find the other world that Jones's grandfather talked about. But there's a storm, a big one, and the boat is wrecked. And the text doesn't tell us if they survived or if they ever made it to another land. It's a total cliffhanger. But we do know that Jones eventually ends up back in Utopia.
He does.
He's captured and brought before Anne, the leader.
Oh, boy. This is where things are going to get interesting. The prodigal son returns, and he's carrying all this dangerous knowledge from the outside.
Yeah, and that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. But I can tell you this. The truth about Utopia that Anne reveals is far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Utopia. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it? And listener, we'll leave you with this. What would you do if you were in Jones's shoes?